Hello, I'm Ricky Lee, and today on the watch list, I'm joined by Derrick Dao, CEO of Vision Ltd. The company has announced plans to acquire manganese carbonate projects in Slovakia's so-called battery belt, a move that could position Vision within Europe's growing battery material supply chain at a time when the EU is pushing to secure domestic sources of critical raw materials. Derrick, welcome to the watch list.
Thanks, Ricky. Thanks for having me on.
So, Derrick, Vision is moving to acquire the Spisske Vlachy and Michalova manganese carbonate projects in Slovakia's battery belt. What's the strategic rationale behind these acquisitions?
Yes, so the acquisition of Spisske Vlachy and the Michalova projects was a calculated move to secure what we believe is the most strategic manganese resource in Europe. We have the largest manganese deposit in Slovakia. And the core reasoning is twofold. One is geology, and the other relates to geography. So first, as it relates to geology, we have manganese carbonate ores here. So unlike oxide ores, which are more typically found elsewhere, carbonate ores allows us to skip an energy-intensive roasting process typically required for oxide ores and go straight to acid leaching, which makes our processing costs potentially cleaner, but cheaper and faster to scale for battery-grade production. Now, the second reason why we acquired these assets is vis-a-vis the strategic location of where these assets are, which is in this heart of what we call this battery belt. These assets are within a very close proximity to the world's leading automotive players, for example, like Volvo's upcoming EV plant in Košice, and the Goshen Innobat gigafactories. Slovakia itself is also the world's leading car manufacturer on a per capita basis. Slovakia produces the most cars in the world on a per capita basis. And because it's got this hub to all these car manufacturers like Jaguar, Land Rover, Porsche, Volkswagen, etc., acquiring this manganese project to support these upcoming EVs or batteries means that we are becoming the just-in-time feedstock provider for the European EV revolution, EV adoption.
Amazing. And so how do these assets position Vision within the Europeans' battery material supply chain, especially in the context of that EU's Critical Raw Materials Act and that push for local sourcing?
Yeah, so given everything that is happening in the world right now, and particularly EU, but not just the EU, everyone's securing strategic critical minerals for their own country. The EU has just passed this EU Critical Raw Materials Act, which we call the CRMA. And the CRMA has fundamentally changed the landscape. It now requires the EU to produce 10% domestic extraction of its raw materials and 40% processing of its raw materials by 2030. So currently, Europe is 100% dependent on manganese imports. It produces zero manganese domestically, high purity manganese. And China controls over 90% of the world's high purity manganese supply chain. And so whether that's China or one other country, that's a very sort of concentrated sole processing risk, right? Our project represents a shift from dependency to sovereignty for the EU. By developing both Spisske Vlachy and the Michalova projects, we can offer European OEMs a de-risked, localized supply chain with very good and strict environmental standards. Further to this, we're targeting what we call a strategic project status under the CRMA. And the strategic project status is not just a label. It actually provides us with streamlined permitting and prioritized financing within the EU, which effectively fast tracks our timeline to production. So what we're doing here is positioning Vision to be the primary domestic manganese solution, which allows the European battery industry to survive, compete, and grow.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for filling us in on that today, Derrick.
Thanks a lot, Ricky.
Once again, that is Derrick Dao, CEO of Nuclear Vision Ltd. For more on the company and its battery materials strategy in Europe, visit nuclearvisionltd.com. That's all for this episode of The Watchlist. I'm Ricky Lee. Make good choices today.